JLU Knowledge Series takes, fascinating, accomplished guests as a part of its sessions, then sits them down with me or with any of my colleagues and hosts out here about the issues of the day-to-day life, about their journeys, unhurried, civil, thoughtful conversations that we want to do. And, these are essentially stories and stuff that students as well as faculty are very, very interested in. And I would urge everyone who's out here, including the students, colleagues, as well as my members of the faculty, to kind of, go back onto the websites and our Facebooks and various places where many of such episodes have been kind of parked as of now. And I'm pretty sure that as a part of our journey today, you'll find this particular session very, very interesting as well. Interestingly, I think the task of introducing my distinguished guest today is both very complicated as well as pretty daunting. Why? Because he's a business visionary. He's a CEO of ABP Network since January 2019. Before that, he was the chief operating officer of the group for about 7 years. He has about 25 years of experience in the media sector. He's on the board of News Broadcasters Association of India and Mobile Marketing Association of India. A true industry specialist and a veteran, he's also the director of International Advertising Association and a former director of Indian Broadcasting Foundation as well. He's a proud recipient of several prestigious awards, including felicitations, including the News Television CEO of the Year 2019 award and Business Leader of the Award in 2018. An alumnus of Harvard Business School, he also holds a degree in history and postgraduate degree in modern Indian history from Delhi University. Without further ado, I would want to invite Shri Avinash Pandey, Chief Executive Officer for ABP Network. So welcome, sir. So I guess your mic is.
Sorry, yes, my mic was. There's a new technology. This is the result of the technology. There is a button here which I have to press each time that I speak. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of echo in this one. So, Professor Divakar, thank you very much for first of all calling me here. I do not know who told you to call me here. I'm most unlikely candidate to be sitting amongst you. But anyway, thank you very much for calling me here, and I'll try my best that my time with you and your team is worthwhile.
No, thank you so much, Avinaji. I think our industry relations and industry student services team are pretty proactive. So I think when they kind of, initiated and when they kind of, told us that you have consented to be part of our knowledge series, we were all very, very happy. And I think you're the perfect person to guide us and tell us. As I start this particular session and a few of the questions, one of the first things which comes to my mind, and especially, because I'm part of the journalism and creative studies faculty, is that what's it like running a news or a media organization versus any other business and corporate organization? Is there a big difference running a media organization and a non-media and a general organization?
See, running a business requires a certain degree of discipline and common sense. That's true for all industries. You should know how to manage profitability year after year and the brand equity of your product, manage people, manage external relationship, and etc. So it's more or less in many ways it's more or less like running any other organization. However, running a media organization requires one big thing which is very rare: a very strong spine. Because you are in a business of telling uncomfortable facts. And most of the time, it's difficult at both the end, people who are saying and people who are receiving. Facts also is a problem because as we know that because we express everything in the language, and this is, I'm assuming that a lot of your students are here today, the language has its own limitation. It has its cultural boundaries. It has its understanding of the particular idiom in which you use your language. So often the truth is not based on the language that you use, but what maximum people has agreed to agree on your communication. And that becomes a very difficult task when you are managing a business where day in, your day out job is to tell the truth to the people, which other people think is not truth. So, so that way you require a very strong spine to stay afloat in your business. It's also one of the business which is very, very heavy in input cost. So most of the costs are fixed. Like, for example, if you look at it, what happened during the COVID, a lot of companies shut down a division or an operation because they thought that we will not be able to use it, and hence it is prudent to cut down the cost. But in our business, if you cut down a particular cost, you won't be able to function because everything is linked to each other. So that way it requires a great sense of understanding the cultural ecosystem, the nuances of running this business. And thus it's slightly different than many other businesses.
Interesting, because we see, and particularly in the current strategic media environment that we particularly more from a business and organizational perspective, we see that there's a huge amount of turbulence, and many of those thinkers and people talk about it, that this is very multifactorial. I mean, the reasons for it essentially. And many times, when we have spoken to some of the leaders as well as some of the journalists as well, they said that, that it's more of an iterative process which people follow in terms of trial and learning as they go along. And I think my next question essentially was also related to the first, poser which I put, which is, do creative businesses in general, Avinash, do creative businesses require slightly highly evolved level of creative leadership or business leadership?
Definitely, yes. Nobody knows better than you. You have worked in Ogilvy. So see, at the end of the day, it's a creative business. You are going to tell a story, and that story has to be liked repeatedly by the people whom you are serving. So it's not a one-time activity. You have to tell a good story every single day, and in our business, every single hour. Of course, that requires an art. And see, there are all kinds of leadership models available in the world. But most important leadership is authentic leadership, where you should have your own original thinking. And that authenticity should come in the way of creativity. What I have seen, Professor Shukla, is that if you hire talented people and you let them do their job, your organization will go leaps and bounds anywhere. You hire a non-creative person in our business, and you end up doing the same job again and again, and until your company shuts down. So the hiring talent, it becomes very critical for which determines the success of the organization. For example, I'm a firm believer that if you're working in India in our kind of business, it's very important that you hire someone who understands India better. Ogilvy, where you work, Piyush Pandey, my senior and dear friend, always tells me that he sends people 1 month in a year on a second-class train to travel in India to understand as to how India is. Unless you've not done that, how will you sell products to people in India? That's true for journalism. If you don't understand India or the world, and you have to be creative in telling a story, because the words that you choose, language that you use, the body language that you display in front of camera, everything matters. Absolutely. And hence, a leader has to be very agile and creative.
No, very well said it. In fact, it resonates very well with my learnings as well, Avinashji, because I remember, Piyush, because you named him as well, Piyush used to, always say that, the time has come when we need to have authentic leaders rather than authoritative leaders. Exactly. So it's a very, very profound thought that you had it. Just moving on to the way that in today's world, the media businesses, they're very complex, and they're becoming even more complex if you look at it. So how do you look and I'm pretty sure, Avinash, you are at the forefront of it, is how do you look at the transparency dynamics which every news organization is going through? And they're running under this particular kind of a scenario, and the volatility it brings to decision making as well, because it's not a vanilla kind of a thing whereby a CEO or a chairman is able to take a decision, because there's so many factors which are surrounding your kind of a business. So how do you look at this transparency dynamism which is there?
Okay, to quote Karl Marx, who said that the highest state of communism is when the government does not exist, right? everybody does the thing on his own and equilibrium establishes. Let me tell you, while Marx is dead, that kind of philosophy works in the news organization, because we are running a 24/7 TV channel. I'm sitting in front of you. While I'm the CEO, I'm not determining what is going to go on air right now. There are broad policies as a leader that you do the framing, but people who are sitting in the PCR room, people who are running the shift, people who are in charge of the hour, they are the one who are actually deciding which news to pick up, which news to drop, which news to say, what extent that will play. All these decisions are done based on what you receive and what you see the surroundings, means what your competition is doing at that time. Because at the end of the day, you are fighting for an eyeball. So that way, decision making is quite quite plural in our kind of organization, and thus it requires, as I said in the first opening remarks, is that the quality of talent becomes extremely important that you have, because people should not only think twice before they act, but they should also know how to think. And that's very important for when you run an organization, complex organization like ours. As far as the transparency is concerned, whatever we do, every moment, whether in our digital field or on television, public is seeing. They are making an opinion and they are commenting on it. For example, day before yesterday, we had a story about the economic reasons of the farm reforms and its impact. You may or may not agree with the view, but those views that we aired was the view of an economist. But unfortunately, the anchor who read that story received a lot of criticism on her Twitter handle and Facebook page and all that. So whatever we do, we accept that whatever we are going to do will invite public opinion. And that's why I said you need to have a very strong spine. That you stay firm of what you believe is the right thing to do, and you should continue doing.
Very interesting, Avinash, because I was just thinking about it as you were sharing your thoughts. Is that the perspectives, particularly, and that's really becomes my next line of question is, your perspectives on the news in this age of intolerance and rhetoric, as we all talk about it. And this is something which, we at a university, we keep on hearing from our students, my undergraduate and postgraduate, any of the students who are coming to journalism and media studies. The first question is that, the textbooks, the entire pedagogy, everything teaches them to be the seekers of truth from a journalism perspective. But in the age of this intolerance and rhetoric, what is news, what is not news, and what is news and what are views, all these things are kind of muddling up the entire environment as far as the new generation journalists are coming up. So your views on this, how should the journalists be walking this thin line of truth seekers, bringing the right information, factual information, at the same time trying to navigate through this intolerance and rhetoric?
I tell you something, Professor, that there is always a lot of subjectivity in objectivity. There is nothing objective in this world. As I said, truth is the Washington Post says that democracy dies in darkness. I think the light is the most important thing. And when you look at through that lamp, each one of us can have a very different opinion about the subject. And that's why I say that objectivity has got a lot of subjectivity. Truth in itself does not exist. I've said this in my editorial room several times. Truth is something that many people, most of them have probably agreed to agree upon. Now, in a world where when I was in college, my professor said that, look, the day you have the ability to question the printed words, that day you are educated. He did not say you should question. He said that you should have the ability to question it. Now, what has happened over past, particularly after the 2008 or 9, I think that's when the Facebook came in the as a full-fledged in most part of the world. And that printed thing started becoming, the democratization of that printing press happened, where everybody became a publisher, right? So everybody can publish their own page. And everybody started publishing that subjectivity into that page, which started coming to you. There is a logic that we see in the business of advertising. Advertising is done for those consumers who don't consume your product. For example, there is a statistics that only 3% of the consumer of Coca-Cola consume Coke every day. Rest consumes randomly once in a year or more, but they are not everyday consumer. Now, advertising of Coke happens to make those people buy Coca-Cola. That is why it goes on television, billboards, stadiums, and printing press. What digital social media does? Digital social media does is that if you like Coca-Cola, I'll keep sending you ads of Coca-Cola until you become obsessed with Coca-Cola. That happens with the views. If you start liking, you like one particular view of Professor Divakar, if there are students here, only Professor Divakar view for next 5 days will start coming you. And if you like it more and more of it will come. And finally, you will become biased with Professor Divakar's view. I'm not saying Professor Divakar's view is not good to be biased, but I'm saying that this is how the medium works. When and then you become motivated by that point of view and start writing, reading, and saying things about that. So for a journalist, it's very, very important that you should, when you look at the social media, you should look at it without not seeing it. You should see it, what you're looking at it. And you should make your own judgment. We started a program, Professor Divakar, about 5 years back called The Viral Such. It was the first fact-checking program on television. It was the most popular program until a lot of fact-checking, and fact itself started getting questioned that the television itself is full of rumor, television is fake and all that. All kind of things started coming up. But I tell you, on our digital site as well as on television, we still believe that the job of the leader, the people who are in charge of the production desk, they need to evaluate each story with the facts first. Often, the most journalists do a mistake. Okay, they think it's their duty to tell the truth, while their duty is to put a perspective with mathematical model on the truth, that these are the facts, this is what has happened, you make your own opinion. Once you start doing the other things, then you become like social media. You'll have a very strong followers for a few days and few months, but finally you are going to topple down like many organizations have in the past.
Very correct. You're very well said. In fact, Avinash, as I was kind of building up on this particular session, I came across this, kind of his thought of yours in 2018. In fact, you had said that the narrative of what is truth is getting captured by social media rather than the credible broadcasters. And that's the biggest challenge for the news channels that I see going forward. And this is what you had said. So in 2018, you had said that. And I know that, as ABP, as you yourself as a media leader, you have done a lot of work in this fact checking and those areas, credible news areas. So where are we in terms of, in a general sense I'm talking about, where are we in terms of where the fact checking, authenticity of the news and those things were there in 2018 to 2020? Have we moved the needle to some extent?
So see, the fact checking is a very expensive venture, okay? Expensive in both the sense of money and time. We're in television business where the news breaks and 5 news channels have put it on air. So I'll tell you a real story, okay? The real story is this, that she was also the Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister for a while. I'm just forgetting her name. Sadhvi something. She was our Ganga cleaning minister also last government. She went to Chennai and in 2001 and 2 and she met someone and somebody narrated that she got married with that person in a short notice. And when that news leaked, she was on a plane from Chennai to Delhi. One particular news channel went on air with a lot of stories, guests, and other news channels where I was working at that time were under tremendous pressure to put this news on air. But we had no source to verify this. The source was another TV channel, which was also very, very credible channel. And we decided not to put this news on air. When she landed at Delhi airport, obviously the mob of media with the boom mic and all that, etc., was there. And she got furious and she said, "Who has spread this rumor?" And she straight away, instead of going to the party headquarters or somewhere, reached to the television studio saying that, how dare you air false news about me? Now, the error was done is that one reporter was standing outside, heard a rumor. He thought I should be first on the television and I should say this news and etc. So that pressure is always there. And you have the competition has the pressure saying that if I don't air this news, my rating will fall because people will move to, because this is a very sensational news. And that's why, and it costs money because if your rating goes down, your advertising rates goes down and it costs a lot of money. So for us, it's a huge investment that we do. So we have put people in place who checks all the news. And we have said that, look, in today's world of social media again, the news has become bereft of medium. Actually, what Sanjay did in Mahabharata is already happening every moment in everyone's life. You come to know about the news even while you do not have a TV set in front of you. So our job as a television broadcaster and a digital publisher is that we should verify and we should tell a credible and interesting story instead of breaking the news all the time. Because news is broken. If you go, those who covered the Bihar election, my friends, they are saying that, look, the kind of evolved consumer that I found, even a rickshaw puller was well aware about the political scenario, which was, so people are consuming news all the time through different means and ways. Credible organizations have a job too. And so in 2020, in the COVID, when a lot of rumor were going around how the virus is spreading, what are the things that you should do, everybody almost became a doctor, which we were already, many of us were in India. So it was very important for us to communicate effectively. And so it cost a lot of money. We have done a lot of investment in this field.
Right. And interesting because recently, there was also some figures which I believe Reuters had put somewhere, wherein they had talked about the trust in news has gone down dramatically. And obviously it was more of a sampling thing that they would have done it across the world. And I believe that, this erosion of trust in the news and the newscasters is primarily coming because of the fact that there's so much of a chaos in terms of what is authentic news. And like you rightly said it, whereas the audiences and viewers, they are pretty intelligent. I remember again, I know that I'm going back to the same David Ogilvy, but such profound magic lanterns that he had given to the world. He said that he talked in terms of our consumers, Avinashji. He said the consumers are not morons, they are your wives. And interestingly, the same thing is a kind of a scenario which is playing out when we talk of viewers and audiences. So I think the trust news essentially is very important. And why I bring this up is because most of our students, not just for the media students, I'm talking about any students who are there at our universities, they question these things. But the brighter side is that we're getting some amazingly intelligent and bright and forward inspiring students who are coming into this space of media and journalism, and they want to, take it up and move forward. One of the questions, Naji, which had come from one of our students, PG students actually was, and she had actually mentioned that, don't you think there is in fact, this was addressed to you, sir, there is a need to understand more about ownership of the news organizations, their shareholding patterns, their revenue models, and all those things which should be slightly more transparent. Reason being that they want to know how exactly these organizations are functioning. What are the biases and what are the kind of connections which are there? Because it's a muddle to some extent. While good people are doing some amazingly good work, but as all sectors, there would be some things which may not be so perfect and transparent. So this transparency again is a question which kind of confronts us. So how would you react to that?
See, that's a very good question, by the way. There is a problem in this country on media ownership. If the media has to be free, the ownership has to be free. When Jeff Bezos acquired Washington Post, the one thing that he did, which he has publicly did, and he practices it, is that he does not interfere any time between editorial matters of Washington Post and his Amazon business. In fact, his Amazon business has suffered because of Washington Post continuous attack on the Trump administration. But he has written in his book, it's in public domain. But unfortunately, that's not the way it happens in India. As far as our organization is concerned, our promoters have only one business, which is publishing newspapers, magazines, and running television channels and digital publishing. So we have no other source of earnings and revenue. But if you are not dependent on the revenue by telling a good story and telling truth and taking out a newspaper, then I do not know from why and where these people get money and they run their businesses. For example, to run a national news channel in Hindi, you require minimum between 150 crore to 200 crore every year. And there are not more than 3 or 4 channels which earn this much. So if you go to any regional market, for example, in Uttar Pradesh, there are 13 news channels when we entered the market last year. 13, right? There are 27 or something news channels in Andhra and Telangana market. And I can tell you, to become profitable in a market like Uttar Pradesh, where there are 13 players, I need to be number 1 or number 2, which is very, very difficult. It requires a lot of investment. And if I do that, it will take me 5 years to break even. And by that time, my accumulated losses would be that high that I have to be operational for next 10 years to recover that accumulated loss. So it's not an easy business, and business has become very difficult because there are too many players, and these too many players are bringing homogeneity and heterogeneity. So you are getting different brand logos, but you are more or less getting the same products, and thus your job becomes very, very difficult. So, it is up to the government to actually act on this. That who are funding these news channels, why they exist, what is their interest, but at the same time, it is very important that that people should be allowed to say or write things which they think they shall be. Public is not an idiot, as you rightly said. That even British Empire thought that Indians don't know how to administer themselves, and these poor farmers certainly don't know what Gandhi talked about. While if you look at subaltern history, they will tell you that the peasants who were singing songs while plowing their field, in their songs there was a revolt against the British Empire. So thinking that public is an idiot, they don't understand things is something that a kind of what you call the Vichardhara, which is propagating this in there. And frankly, one should ask, who is interested in who is interested and why it is interested looking at demise of the free press? Who is benefiting out of it? And if we understand that, then I think we know the answer.
No, very, very interestingly, you said that because, and I think many of the students who are here as a part of our audiences today as well, Bhavnaji, are, I mean, they could be from media or from management or from law, any other discipline that they would be. I think, it's a kind of a reflection that we need to do, is that if we want the right credible news to come to you, I think as viewers and consumers, we need to be willing to pay for that news, number 1. And 2 is, as you rightly said it, the stories behind the stories need to be understood well, because so that the right organizations and news and journalists are doing their job and work as good as possible. One more thing which I wanted to, talk about, because I think you have a good perspective on the digital, kind of a technologies and that side as well. Right now, there's a huge amount of battle of, consumer engagement happening from a media content perspectives. And as we all know that physics is not going to change the number of hours in a day, it is going to be 24 only. So then in that case, the imperative and the challenge for any media organization becomes is to ensure that we are able to get content in such a way and such engaging content that people are able to use it. And we know that 5G technology is more ubiquitous distribution of content is going to make it more accessible. So the challenge on one side is the affordability of that particular content, news or non-news. Other side is obviously the consumption of news. And then the third part is where there's a huge amount of battle for the eyeballs or viewership and those things. So, so what's this content, landscape evolving like?
So there are two sides of it, Professor Diwakar, of this business. One is the content provider, which is the publisher. So those who are making the content. And second side is the platform operator. So like Daily Hunt, YouTube, Facebook, Google, etc. Now the investment that comes is maximum on the platforms. In fact, all money goes to the platform business because it's a very, very scalable model. While people who are going on those platforms are essentially going to consume content, right? The content creator does not invite investment, does not get that much of investment. So the content creator is largely dependent on sharing of revenue from the platform operator. And that is the big flaw in this business model. That's why if you look at it, now finally Australian government has said that your court has said there that you have to pay, Google has to pay to the publisher. In fact, just before this meeting, I was in another meeting on the similar lines. The point is that anybody today is going to these aggregators or on the platforms to consume news or entertainment or information, which is created by a creative guy who has done that job. And there is a lot of opaqueness in terms of what money the platform operator is actually getting from advertiser, and he shares a certain pie. So whatever he gives, you have to accept it. What it has done is that democratization of content. So now anybody can become a publisher and newspaper owner. So, so you can publish a lot of things, and these platform operators serve to a lot of consumers. But what makes difficult is that to do a quality content, if you want to be an economist in India, if you want to be a WSJ in India, it is almost impossible because the kind of investment that you require to do that kind of story, which can be only be done by large media houses. And large media houses somehow, their balance sheet is so lopsided that they're not ready to invest further in this. So, so the benefit of this is that everybody we have done this survey where we have gone to farmers in interior of Madhya Pradesh and UP. And he is in his field watching our TV channel live on his mobile in the field. And he's not educated. He's going through the voice command. He's seeing a lot of videos. I have met a lot of taxi drivers who are fan of some of our prime time anchors across TV industry. But they are driving all the time taxi. Whenever they stop, they watch it on their mobile. So the democratization of content has happened, but return on those investment has not gone back to the media publisher. And that's the big challenge which industry has to solve in next couple of years. Because otherwise there's no incentive for people to create good content.
No, you're very correct. And in fact, again, since, as I said, we are doing a kind of a knowledge series, I think there are lessons which come out, whether it is content or like you talked about the credibility of it, or also talk about the entire business models, actually. Interesting. In fact, there was a very interesting question. Again, it comes from one of the students. And Avinashji, this student has just got into the journalism program after class 12. So interesting, okay. Right? The moment they get into the university, they have a perspective. They said, during the initial stages of the careers, and imagine this is coming from a student who's just got into journalism, careers in the field of journalism, what kind of mistakes usually the freshers make? So what kind of mistakes fresher makes when they get into the journalism sector or space in the industry rather? What are the kind of mistakes which the freshers make when they join organizations, especially in the journalism space? And what should they be careful about? How they should be building up their careers in journalism?
एक ना मैंने इनको हिंदी में बोलूँगा, हमारे ना यहाँ दिल्ली का जब आप बॉर्डर क्रॉस करते हैं, हरियाणा की तरफ जाते हैं, जो रोड अमृतसर को जाती है, उस पर दिल्ली पुलिस ने एक होर्डिंग लगा रखी है कि जिनको जल्दी थी वो चले गए। तो शॉर्ट टर्म में कुछ भी नहीं होता। सो अगर आप अपना करियर शुरू कर रहे हैं तो एक द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट फैक्ट दैट यू शुड रिमेंबर इज दैट यू शुड हैव अ स्ट्रॉन्ग स्पाइन एंड अ क्यूरियस माइंड, because without curiosity you will not achieve anything, and that curiosity also necessitates you to be patient, because reward will finally go to somebody who is very competent, but reward does not come in a day. Also, there are a lot of pressures when you start working as a trainee journalist. So you will be given night shifts, you'll be sent to farmers agitation, where farmers, chances are you get beaten because you don't agree with their side of story, or anything can happen. Police can lathi charge you. So you're always at the forefront of getting all kind of adverse environment. And the most successful journalists I have seen, some of them have been my bosses, and some of them I work with now, are those people who don't just narrate what they see. They add things together that they know. They give a perspective, and yet being truthful without being offensive. And that's the guiding principle of writing good article, saying a good story in journalism. So welcome to the profession. It's a very noble profession. It also takes you places. So you're in a good hand.
Also, Avinashji, I know that we were talking about it earlier. Not just as a CEO of a very major, organization and a professional in that space, but more as a scholar, if I may ask, how important is reading, writing, listening for any media professional? And in fact, I would add management, even law students as well out here. How important is that? Because that is something that many of the university professors are saying that particular habit is dying or going away. Although I differ to some extent with them, is because you need to understand that the world is changing. So the formats in which the students and young people would want to read may be very digital. That's perfectly fine, as long as they are reading and listening. So how do you react to this?
Sir, if साहित्य संगीत कला विहीन साक्षात पशु पुष्पिशान है ना, जो हमारे संस्कृत में श्लोक है, वो जिंदगी में हर समय लागू होता है. If you are not reading and writing, and reading as much as possible in your free time, then frankly you are in the wrong job, or you have chosen the wrong profession, whether you are a law student or whether you are a journalism student or any SOS student. For example, as far as I am concerned, I read about close to 8 to 10 newspapers every day. And somebody can ask, where do I get the time? I get a lot of time because I spend a lot of time in the car traveling to work. And when I go home, after dinner, I spend a lot of time reading. TV is often running around me, but it's on mute just to see what's going on. International and national put together, I read about close to at least 2 books in a month. I'm a fast reader. And I think that investment one needs to do in himself or herself at whichever part of career that you are in. You must get access to good books, people like Professor Diwakar, and good newspapers, so that you can continue to get yourself enriched with knowledge.
It's very interesting. I know, many of the viewers, I mean, if you have kind of done some kind of understanding of Avinashji, I learned it. One is he's an ardent, I mean, he just loves his coffee. That's something I discovered. And that's very amazing. And the way that he had described in one of the videos, and I loved that actually, Avinashji, for you. Second is, he was talking to me yesterday, and this is a kind of a trivia for all of you. And one line which caught my attention and what he had told me was, Diwakar, in case, if you're not interesting, right, Avinashji? If you're not interesting, yes, then you would not be. What did you tell me? And you can tell everyone else.
I said that, look, the success in the world requires 2 qualities. You have to be interesting and you have to be interested. If you're not interesting and not interested in anything, nobody will be interested in you. So these are the fundamental, and I can speak about another hour on that topic. So,
No, we'll do it again another time. Just as we end, we have about 3 minutes or 4 minutes max that we have it as directed. I really want to know, Avnashji, and if you can, kind of give us a sense, your journey, you have such a distinguished, career so far, and you have been very proud of it, I know. What are the life lessons, some of the life lessons, maybe a couple of them, which you learned as you grew from, and you had said that you grew from a town, Patna, and you studied and you lived and then you moved on and went on and studied at Harvard. What were some of the life lessons which you are still utilizing in your current position?
There could be many, Professor Diwakar, but one thing that has paid me huge dividend is my my curiosity to do better than what I'm doing today. And for me, every day of my life is day one of my job. And that's the way I have worked all my life. What do you do on day one of your job? That's the way if you operate. The most important thing, which is completely a casualty in today's generation, is patience. So if you cannot wait, everything takes time, to happen. But if you do not have the patience to wait for it, unfortunately, you will become हम गुजरते गए, karma गुजरता गया, वो कहानी बन जाएगी फिर, so then you'll only have regrets. So largely, it's like treating my work as day one of the job every single day when you get up. So,
wow,
and that's curiosity of doing something new. So
that's very interesting, and I'm pretty sure that these are the small gems which come out, and I think if we are able to remember, because I think these are important things, very important, and many of us may not realize at this point of time, but as we move ahead, we realize and look back and say, yeah, this was something precious. So most fascinating session that I had been part of it, and very refreshing, I must say, Avnashji. Amazing to realize how, these are the things which I get out of it. Amazing to realize how clarity of mind, focus in what you want to do, and being patient about it, being curious about it. And I believe, looking at you, Avnashji, I think staying very close to the ground and roots, this is the kind of a vibe I get. I was talking to you yesterday and today when I'm in front of you. You stay very close to the ground somehow, I feel, and very close to the roots. And I think these are the things which we all have learned, bring out the most illuminating knowledge in each of us, because it's a knowledge series. So I think these are the things which keep us illuminated. And many years ago, Avnashji, somebody had said research essentially just informs. Many times it does not illuminate. And I think these are the kind of...
Exactly, yeah. Correct.
Yeah, illuminate. So you truly optimize it, Avnashji, I must say. So thank you so much. And I really look forward to when the travel is easy and everybody can move around and you're at the campus. It's a lovely, lush green campus. And we would just be excited to host you and meet all our students face to face. So hopefully looking forward to that in future. Thank you so much.
I'm humbled at your invitation and your good words, Professor Diwakar.
Namaskar. Thank you so much, all of you.